friends. Welcome again to another edition of the Liven Show. Today we have been joined by the author of Immigration, Race and Survival from Trinidad to Canada, Living in Parallel Worlds. It's a part 2 of our interview with the author Cecily Alexander. Cecily, welcome to the Liven Show. How are you doing?
Thank you, Gabriel. I'm really pleased to be having the second interview to tell you about my memoir.
Happy to see you today.
Thank you.
Yeah. In our first interview, we talked about, your experiences coming to Canada, what it was like, your experiences into the book, writing the book. But today, I want us to center and to dive deeper into your book and talk about some of the themes that you wrote about and some of the experiences that you experienced in your career as a dietitian. I would want us to know, what was your first job in Canada?
Yes, as a dietitian, because I had other jobs throughout university that were just, jobs that helped me to make money, to just some very small jobs that I worked at. But my first job as a dietitian, I interned in Montreal. I think I said this in the first interview, and moved from Montreal to Toronto and hunted for about 6 months before I was able to land my first job in London, Ontario, right here in London. So that was it, and at Victoria Hospital in London was my very first job.
What was the experience like at, working at the Victoria Hospital?
Well, I was quite excited. There were actually 3 positions, 2 full-time and 1 part-time. And I was offered the part-time position. But in spite of that, I had gotten a job as a dietitian, so I packed up all my belongings and got an apartment and moved here. And it was great. I got along so well with the rest of the dietitians, but also gained the trust and admiration of my manager and the director there. And they both ended up, after 6 months, offering me a full-time position. So I moved from part-time to full-time, which I was very pleased to do.
And then later on, you were married.
I got married when I was in this job in 1979, so it was just about a year and a half later. And my husband, though, it was my long-term boyfriend from university. We had actually been together for 6 years at this point, but he lived in Kitchener, so that produced a bit of a dilemma of my moving to Kitchener to be with him. But it's interesting, I was so happy to have this job. I wasn't willing to give it up and move to Kitchener and not be employed. So I stayed back for 6 months in London and applied for a position, the very first position in Kitchener. And it was really interesting. I wasn't hired. The manager at the time, the director, told my manager that she found me too outspoken and aggressive. It was the beginning of some of the black stereotypes that I have had throughout my career.
And that is where you started experiencing, racism in your professional setup as a dietitian.
I would say that would be the first time. And but my managers and director in Victoria really wanted me to get this job. So they did that back then. She personally phoned the director in Kitchener and said, give me another chance. And she coached me to be as passive and docile as I wasn't really part of my personality, but that's what I did. Right now, the term for that is called code switching. And it's done a lot by blacks in the white environment to adjust their personality in terms of how they speak or how they carry themselves, to almost mirror, to get more approval from the white interviewer. So that's what I did. That's what she wanted, and that's how I responded and was able to get a job there. And had, I would say, I think it was about 7 or 8 years of really a job that I enjoyed and excelled at with the team on the floors, because dietitians work with a team of doctors and nurses on the floors. And I, at that point, thought, where do I want to head in dietetics? So I started taking management courses at the university, at Wilfrid Laurier in Kitchener, and applied for 2 management positions at Kitchener, but wasn't hired.
Why did you feel a need to code switch in your career?
Well, the code switch was necessary for me to get that job, because I realized, and then I didn't even know it was called code switching, but I knew from actually at that time for our dietetic interns from the Caribbean, we tended not to get positions. So a lot of times we would disguise our resumes or do things just to get our foot in the door, because someone will see on your resume with a lot of high school and other experiences from the Caribbean would not give you that opportunity. There was a fair bit of racism in that respect too in our profession.
And code switching is still a thing nowadays?
Code switching is actually something I recommended when I was a university professor at Brusher to students to get their foot in the door, to get their internship interview. It's one of the ways so that you're not just eliminated. When you look at the literature on this, it's actually said that many people are not interviewed, that this is proven, just by their first or last names. Like if you're Charles or Chris or John,
like
you'll get through. Yeah.
Like my last name is Ndayishimiye.
Right. That already may not get you the interview, believe it or not.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk about your experiences at University Hospital in London.
Well,
that's at Western University.
Yeah. Well, as I just ended up saying, that I didn't get, I wasn't getting any of the management jobs I applied for at Kitchener, and I was actually told by, I would call him my ally now, I'm using the word ally and allyship, that my ally was the chaplain at Kitchener, and he said to me, Kathleen will never hire put a black person in a management position. I went, what? But anyhow, at that point I started to apply for jobs outside of London and back to London again. I got the job at University Hospital.
Right.
Really an excellent position, management position. I was in charge of the clinical nutrition department and reported to a VP that gave me total autonomy to develop this department. And I had great rapport with the other VPs, our CEO at the time, our director of nursing. It was a really nice, close-knit management team that worked until things started happening again with restructuring.
What kind of things started happening there?
Well, with restructuring, it was called the downsizing of middle management, right? Where a lot, I think we went from something like 40 positions to 17. And I actually, luckily, because of my rapport with my VP and the VP of Finance, they created a position for me. And I was saved, while the head of OT, the head of physio, the head of pharmacy, all those other positions were fired or downsized. I kept my position, and at one point I thought I was lucky to do this, but because of the manager they put in charge of my department at the time, I actually in some ways wish that I had left with the rest of my colleagues, because I describe her in my memoir as being my nemesis.
Let's talk about your manager in this position.
Yeah. So microaggressions, and I talk about only not knowing the word at the time in my memoir. I said I only discovered the term after I left the hospital environment. But anyhow, her microaggression started immediately, literally on my first week of the job. When she came in to meet me, she told me this whole list of things that were inappropriate. And it wasn't my work ethic or what I had done, it was my personality. She didn't like the way I talked. I was too friendly with my staff. I I talked with my hands, very cultural things were her criticism. And she had this term that not even human resources knew what it meant. She said I had team-mindedness. And
what was that supposed to mean?
I know. It was almost undefinable because I just thought, if she tells me exactly what this says, I can change it. But it was hard for her to define. One of the other things that she did, which is a sub-definition of microaggressions, is micro-invalidation, where the person really tries to silence your voice to make you non-existent. How did she do this? She did this in many ways. She took me off certain committees that I was on. The one hospital committee that I was able to stay on, in this committee, she had another nurse on the committee write down everything I said and then evaluate it.
I see.
I chaired the dietitians meeting, and she took me off the chairmanship and chaired it herself. I reported my projects directly to the VP, but she said, no, I would report to the VP for you. It went on and on. We had a little food service meeting with the food service staff, and she had one of the food service supervisors, who's my junior, rate what I said at that meeting on a score of 1 to 4 and give me feedback. It was a horrendous time.
And then you were fired without a cause.
Yeah, I tried to lie low and stay, just basically that, not have any confrontation with her. But when we were restructuring again, that was when the hospitals were amalgamating with Victoria, excuse me, with Victoria and London Health Sciences, University Hospital and London Health Sciences. We weren't London Health Sciences. With Victoria, we became London Health Sciences Centre. But when the amalgamation was happening, she took that opportunity to fire me without cause, but based on my position not being needed anymore. But in private, she said to me she didn't trust me. So again, another theme with white-black relationships, the lack of trust.
And later on, she read your memoir. Did she reach out to you?
No, it wasn't her. I said that my VP read my memoir, and he actually reached out to me and said he was so distressed and upset when he realized how as a professional woman I was treated, and really complimented me and said my role in the department took my department to tertiary and quaternary level, very similar to other strong programs, clinical programs at University Hospital. So that gave me some vindication, you know.
And then the termination of your employment-based career gave you a chance to go back to university to complete your MBA.
It did. And it was part of my goal anyhow to go back to university, and I chose to do my MBA at that time. And yeah, very good time for me.
Let's delve into your experiences at Cornerstone. It appears this is where this was your last...
my last job after university.
Yeah.
I got in, and I've used the names of the hospitals so far, but Cornerstone is still a disguised name of a hospital outside of London that I got a job. And again there, very satisfied for 8 years, did my usual, very good team member, developed protocols. I was the professional practice leader. It was just 3 dietitians. It was just like half a day a week, but I was able to develop a lot of our charting and other guidelines. I became president of the College of Dietitians during that time. I was teaching part-time at the university, at Bristol University. A lot of really good things. Until we started to restructure again after 8 years at Cornerstone.
What were your last 5 years at this?
So then again, I got nurse manager again. I had a dietitian before this for the 8 years, and had a nurse manager as my new manager. And again, I went, this is a deja vu, because it was almost a repeat of what happened to me at University Hospital. from day one, the microaggression started, and that's how you knew it's a microaggression. Mm-hmm. When it happens to you, but the two white dietitians were treated differently. Mm-hmm. So from day one, this person refused to meet with me. She only responded with me by email. And with all of my jobs where I have experienced microaggressions, I have not been able to be faulted based on my work. My work mm-hmm. ethic has always been hard. But she criticized things like, I was not respecting her enough. She felt disrespected, and how I talked to her, and how I, the other thing is the dishonesty theme mm-hmm. that whites sometimes have with black people. Mm-hmm. She thought I was stealing time, that when I was working on my computer, I was working on my college emails and not work emails. So I ended up being hypersensitive, where I kept a log of absolutely everything I did to prove that this was not so.
Right.
But in a way, within the first 4 years under her, again, on the floors, I got so much job satisfaction, because people have asked me when they read my memoir, why did you leave? But my contact with her was more for scheduling, vacations, things along those lines, days off to go to college meetings. And although she didn't make that easy, the rest of my day was actually quite fulfilling. So, mm-hmm. I moved on.
Mm-hmm. There were some instances before the passing of your partner at the hospital. At some point, they called you that they thought you were lying about his illness.
Yeah. Well, as I said, that literally has been, if I think back on it, one of my worst experiences ever. Mm-hmm. Because my husband was diagnosed with prostate cancer, and he was diagnosed as being terminal, given 1.5 years to live, and almost to the day he died 1.5 years later, that diagnosis. So the first few months, he was still functioning fairly well. Mm-hmm. But within the last year, I asked for some flexibility mm-hmm. in my job, in my time. I started and ended in time, and my manager promptly refused. And she said that she didn't believe, again, this idea of being dishonest, mm-hmm. that I was exaggerating his illness. Mm-hmm. And she even said most people men die with prostate cancer, not from it.
So
it was unreal, and that's true, but I said not in this case, Mm-hmm. But she didn't believe me and wouldn't allow me to be flexible or flex my time.
Mm-hmm. How do you see now the future after writing this book, after revisiting your memoirs?
Well, just to give you a very important part of how she started to try to get rid of me, she used something called the attendance management program, mm-hmm. where she ended up disciplining me under attendance management for 2 sick days over a period of 1 year. Mm-hmm. And when I came back I eventually did go off on short-term disability leave, mm-hmm. not because of her, but anyhow, when I went off on short-term disability and I came back from that, she disciplined me again. Since I wrote my memoir, I researched attendance management, and my reasons for being off are what is described as non-culpable. Mm-hmm. So it was an inappropriate use of this, and was only used to try to get rid of me. But I retired before the 4 years was up. Mm-hmm. So the fourth incident happened, I should say, not the 4 years was up, the fourth incident. Because with the fourth incident, you could be fired.
Right.
So I retired first.
How does the future look to you?
The thing about it is, I have ended my memoir of saying the challenge I have, and I was writing to a white audience, was to move from saying they're not racist to being anti-racist. Mm-hmm. And since then, I've done a bit of research and becoming an anti-racist. And it's a big challenge. Mm-hmm. It's a big commitment where the white person has to be actively involved in this change, right? In terms of how they read, in terms of their job, if they're in academia or the school system, how they take a very active role. they have to understand racism because it is in so many different forms. It's not as clear as some people may think what a racist incident is, because something like microaggressions are so subtle. So it's a big challenge, but I'm fairly optimistic. I'm not in terms of the older generation, because I think that it's really hard to change stereotypes that you've had and been reinforced over years. So in terms of my optimism, it's really for the younger generation.
I see. So you've written your book. Your book is out there. Tell us a little bit of the writing experiences and then the publication experiences before we conclude our interview.
Well, writing is, I started it in COVID, so it was actually good. And it's a very disciplined process. I know you have published your memoir too. And it's just a matter of sitting down daily and just going for it and having a lot. I'm lucky, I had something like 8 editors, 8 different people that read different sections of it at different times.
Right.
So that was very positive and really helped me to examine some of who I was. I know, I'll give you a little joke in terms of the writing process. One of the professors at the university is a Trinidadian, and he was a really ideal person for reading my memoir. And at one point I was writing about myself, because that's how I'm called in Trinidad, being colored or mixed. And then in Canada and the States, you're black. So then I switched over to, from black, call myself black, to then call myself mixed. And he wrote his comment, so what happened? Yeah, black anymore? It was very funny. I thought, oh my God, I better clarify and research and explain why I'm using both terminologies. But it was a good process of lots of editing.
Right, and where is your book? Where can we find your book?
You can get my book on Amazon. If it's someone in London, they can get it directly from me. And on my website is CecilyAlexander.com. So it's very easy to access, and you can write to me versus my website also if you wanted to purchase a copy directly.
Yeah, there are also copies in circulation at London Public Library.
Yes, if someone wanted to borrow it, there are 2 copies at the Byron Library where I live, and also at the main branch.
That's right. That's good. Well, thank you so much, Alexander. As we are concluding this interview, I would like to thank our friends who have been with us in this 30 minutes interview. Let's meet again next time, whereby we'll be interviewing and reviewing books with Black authors around London area, but also in Canada-wise. Also, before we conclude, I would like to thank our sponsors. We have Evo TV, we have Win Community Center, we have London Public Library, and Liven Books. All right, see you next time. Thank you so much for being with us.